from Late Night Parents. Ways to follow the show, latenightparents.com. Coming up here shortly. Hope everyone's enjoying the day, staying drama-free, enjoying your loved ones, taking the time out to spend with those loved ones, letting them know that you care about them. You got to ask yourself sometimes, some of the small stuff that we get all caught up in, is going to matter in a year or 5 years? You know, we lost a lot of people over the past 15 to 17 months to this virus. It's allowed a lot of us that time to reflect. And what I wanted to do was share today. Hey, Brian, how you doing? Wanted to share today an interview I did a few years ago, back in August of 2015, when we were the little podcast that could. It's a full-length interview that I conducted with BME community founder Trabian Shorters. So I will decrease and allow the interview to increase, but I want to let you guys know Trabian Shorters is a co-editor with Benjamin Jealous of the best-selling book Reach, 40 Black Men Speaking on Living, Leading, and Succeeding. The website is reachwithus.com. And Mr. Shorters has more than 20 years of experience in diverse fields, including national service, technology, nonprofit, philanthropy, and social entrepreneurship. BME builds a better future based on authentic stories about Black men, their cities, and the causes that we all care about. It was formed by Black fathers, coaches, businessmen, and others of all race and genders who believe that we should value all people, recognize Black men as assets, reject outdated stereotypes, and work together in asset-oriented ways to build a more caring and prosperous society. So, interviews coming up. Hope you enjoy it. Be back.
Live show for just being you, for giving me some criticism on Twitter and all the above. So I do appreciate you. And I'm going to say without further ado, tonight's going to be a special night. It's a special night for many, many reasons. Usually the usual format is we have 3 guests, one at 5 minutes past the hour, 30 minutes past the hour, and 45 minutes past the hour. But every now and then you want to run into a PR firm that presents you with these special guests. And tonight our special guest is Mr. Trabian Shorters. He's a co-editor of Reach, 40 Black Men Speaking on Living, Leading, and Succeeding. And when you run into a powerful personality and person like that, you know, a father, a leader, you don't want to put anyone behind him. So tonight's show won't be your necessary 60-minute show. After Mr. Shorters, we're ending the show. So we're going to drop the mic just like that. I feel really strongly about this person because of what he represents, of what his organization represents, how he's affecting the community. It's a special opportunity to have him here. Before I get into and bring on Trabian Shorters, want to give a big shout out to the Ava Life Center in Eastern Long Island, the Eastern Long Island chapter. On the 29th, they will be giving out 1,000 knapsacks to those that are in need or that require it. So to our youth, we're going to have that wonderful group on next week to talk about what they're doing this year for the Back to School initiative. So it's really, really exciting. Without further ado, I'm going to bring on our guest for the evening, Trabian Shorters. How you doing, sir?
Yeah, how you doing, Ted? I'm doing really well, thank you.
That's excellent. Before I even get started, I want to thank you for just taking the time out of your evening coming on live with us. We really do. I personally appreciate you. Our listeners also appreciate you also, because I was receiving some direct messages and some people read up on you. So I guess I'm not the only one that's reading up on you. But I will not be opening the lines. I'm going to be hoggish tonight. And I really just want to hear your story, because your name came into my circle, I would say early part of the summer. And I was reaching out to various PR stating, how do I get in touch with this person? So every week, let me let you know, on Late Night Parents, we talk about parenting, technology, education, a little bit of sports, and product. We talk about products and product reviews, but we talk about game changers because they're all parents. Yeah. And those specific subject matter experts. But your story is very, very special. So I want to decrease. I'm going to let you increase and tell your story about the BME community and where you come from, and introduce yourself to our listeners.
Sure, great. And thank you for that. That was probably the more gracious introduction I've ever actually received. So I really do appreciate that. Look, my network is called BME Community. It's a network of inspired Black men and other people of all races and genders who are committed to building better communities based on an authentic narrative of who Black men are, what these communities are, and what are the causes that we all care about. And in the work, we're literally in 6 cities with over 18,000 members, and we funded and supported Black men who are deeply and personally committed to the well-being of others. And one of the things we did to help people not just get to know us, but get to know the narrative, the story that we think is unfolding in America, and how we can all play an important role in that story, is we created this book called Reach, 40 Black Men Speak on Living, Leading, and Succeeding. It was co-edited by myself and Ben Jealous, and let's be honest here, Ben Jealous was the one who came up with the idea, the former head of the NAACP. He and I were sitting around talking about the importance of the work, both his work at the NAACP back then and my work in starting Be Me. I was head of the John S. and James L. Knight I was vice president of the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation at the time, and head of their communities program. So Ben and I were talking about, the narrative, the popular narrative around Black people and Black men in particular, and how consistently negative it was. And he said, we should do a book, man. We should just share real stories about real guys, and let them talk about their real lives, and tell people how they dealt with the same issues that everybody else dealt with, how they became great men, why they decided to give back to community. And so that's how the project started. It was Ben Jealous's idea. We then went and called, friends and asked them if they'd be willing to contribute to the book, and it was off and running. And so one of the things I love about Reach, and I'll pause here in a second, but one of the things I love about Reach is it's 40 stories in just 280 pages. So you'll get someone's whole life story, the whole biography in about 6 or 7 pages, right? So it's never boring reading. And you can learn things about people like John Legend or Talib Kweli or Al Sharpton or Ben or Isaiah Thomas if you're into sports. But you can learn about all these men telling stories about their real experiences. If lots of people know John Legend, but I don't think many people know how the death of his grandmother affected his entire family, and it affected him, and how it affected the arc of how he grew up and why he's so committed to the causes that he is now. There's a connection there. And we believe very strongly that if you want to be a great person, you have to know great people, right? You have to see great people. You have to understand that everybody struggles, everybody falls. But then there are those who get up, and then there are those who lift other people up. And these are 40 stories of Black men who've done that in every walk of life.
Trabian, that's powerful, and I do have an e-copy of the book, and I'm starting to, I just received the e-copy of the book, so I will be reading it, and the fact that you can get 40 stories in 200 or so pages, phenomenal work.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, I was going to say, I was going to say, well, we're in the digital age, so we can't do the autobiography of Malcolm X, length of thing and expect the young people to get to the end of it. But we can definitely do 6 or 7 pages. They're very engaging stories, very remarkable men. And let me, if you don't mind, I'm going to share a little bit about my own story, which is also in the book.
That's excellent. Go ahead.
Okay, great. So I was, born 48 years ago in Pontiac, Michigan, to the daughter of some good old-fashioned Christian folk. And my mom was young when she had me. She raised me mostly by herself. She was married for a while, but it was mostly by herself, and with, of course, the help of my grandparents. And I had the misfortune and also the great providence to be a teenager at the time that the war on drugs was kicked off in the U.S. And the interesting thing about that, of course, was crack cocaine became this boogeyman and this terrorist in the Black community across the country, just really tearing down a lot of the inner city neighborhood.
A different future starts with you. That's why GoDaddy does more than help you find a name. You can create, sell, and get found online, so any small business can make a change. We need a new generation of thinking, your way of thinking. Start different at GoDaddy.com.
But there was this concurrent media blitz that just constantly told stories of Black boys in particular as dangerous and criminal and violent and destructive. And this sort of unrelenting portrayal went on for so long that people would commit crimes, like Charles Stewart, for instance, in Boston, killed his wife. And they would just say, oh, it was a Black guy. Some random Black guy showed up out of nowhere and he did this really horrible crime and just left, right? And people recognized that the image of Black males had gotten so consistently negative that you could hang almost anything on them and people wouldn't bat an eye, right? And so we as a whole generation, we grew up on those messages. And what we recognize is now, 2015, we're in a period of time where all those negative stereotypes and ridiculous portrayals of people have a chance to be revised and to be changed and to be done away with. We think it's not an accident that the millennial generation was the first generation to elect a Black man president twice, and the first generation to see gay marriage legalized. And we think that a number of stereotypes and exceptions and perceptions will be changed by this generation over the next decade or so as they mature into power. And Be Me, our network of inspired Black men and their friends, we're all about tipping the balance on this opportunity, this historic moment that we're in, where we can revise the story about America in a way where it is inclusive of all people, where it values Black men as assets, and where we really can work together to hand our children the kind of world that we want them to live in.
Trabian, I want to throw a few things at you. I'm not sure how much time you have, so I want to be cognizant of it. Sure. Do you have a few minutes, or?
Oh, yeah. No, man, this is great. I'm excited. Let's go.
Oh, okay. And I'm not sure if you heard at the top of the show, usually I have 3 guests. Tonight, I said, I'm not going there. Because after the feeling that I got, after reading your story and doing some research and working with the PR folks, I said, I don't want to put anyone behind you because to them, they won't be able to hold the candles to you. So I left it open just like this. But I want to throw a few things against the wall at you, and I'm going to tell you this much. You were 48, I'm 45. I remember 1985 when the crack cocaine epidemic hit.
There you go.
In New York, and I was living in Queens at the time, Queens, New York, and it hit really hard because it was like zombies out there in the street, people that you knew during the daytime. But at nighttime, they transformed into something that you were just like, oh my goodness, and to the point where they were ready to shake you down.
Yes, sir. Yes. Yeah, I distinctly remember the same thing you're talking about. Like, I remember when the neighborhood got to the point, the thing about a crackhead that, people hopefully have forgotten, but you can get a crackhead to do anything for, this other drug. And that's terrifying. That's somebody who's that, lost, that they become that kind of radical agent. You're right, that really does hurt communities.
It destroys communities and, the stigma, the stigmatism that's around them. But I'm going to throw a few things at you because I, like yourself, as if you didn't see my AVI on Twitter, am a Black American, and I'm a male, and I'm a head of household, and so I've been married for 17 years. I have a 13-year-old daughter. I have a 16-year-old niece that we are the guardians for, and an 8-year-old son.
Yep.
And many, many moons ago, yes, we all love Michael Jordan. He's the greatest of all time. But my idol was my dad.
Yeah,
and
man.
Still, but at 83 years young, we could sit there and go to Citi Field and talk and watch a baseball game because that was someone I can connect with and touch versus someone I'm watching on NBC at the time.
That's right. That's right.
And that's part of the problem, or that's part of that gap that we experienced some time ago.
Yeah.
I don't want to start preaching because yes, I'm a deacon at my church, and yes, I do serve well for my church on the trustee ministry and everything else like that. So I'm just going to get where we are, but Black.
Well, hey, brother, look, if I hear a cadence break out, I'll just start tapping the organ. It'll be good. I'm all right. Let's have a good time.
Right. Yeah. Well, we're going to have church tonight, I tell you. But Black Americans are increasingly uneasy about race relations in the United States.
Yes, sir.
Ranking that as the number one problem, along with unemployment, according to the new Gallup poll. Much of this concern, which began growing last year, it was really like 2 years ago with Trayvon Martin, is driven by highly publicized police shootings of unarmed Black men. Yeah. I'm going to leave that because these are your words, and I want you to take it there and just elaborate a little bit on that.
Sure. And, earlier this week, on August 17th, NBC News ran an op-ed that I did on this very subject because I had to talk to my son about this. Now, you have daughters and a son. I have 2 sons. And when, these are young black boys, they're not men yet, but these young brothers are trying to make sense of a world where you could be gunned down for walking to the corner store in your dad's neighborhood, or for sitting in a car, or for minding your own business by the authorities, right? And it seems to happen with impunity. And so I was talking to my son, who's 22, my youngest son, who's 22.
Discover matches all the cash back you earn on your credit card at the end of your first year. It's amazing because Discover's accepted at 99% of places in the U.S. that take credit cards. Learn more at discover.com/yes. 2021 Nielsen Report. Limitations apply.
About this, and I just wrote in this NBC piece, if your readers, if your listeners care, that bit.ly/join BME. But to your point, what I told my son and what I believe we have to tell our kids about this is this type of violence is left over from an era where people were raised to be afraid of Black people and to have disdain for Black people. And I can defend the comments because I'm not trying. I know that kind of thing paints a broad brush. But again, if you remember the way the media was covering us for 20 years, then I'm not making this up, right? But I think it's left over. It's left over. It's a mistake. It is a practice of a bygone era. I mean, literally an era that has outlived its time. An era that is severely as obsolete as the Southern strategy or the Confederate flag in terms of its place in modern life. And so you have some folks who are still acting out of this old narrative, and they're acting violently, and they're acting with disregard for human life more often than not. But I really do believe that his generation will put an end to this stuff because we're all tired of the racial narrative. We're all tired of the racial strife. We're all tired of having to explain a world to our children that is inexplicable. Having to justify behaviors in the world that are unjustifiable. So the fact that we're all fatigued and basically done with that old narrative hasn't given us a new narrative to embrace, right? And so being me, the work that we do is all about building more caring and prosperous communities inspired by Black men with an authentic narrative about them, their cities, and the causes that we all care about, no matter what our race and gender is. But basically, I started preaching, so I'll close with this. Basically, the idea here and what I leave my kids with is this is going to change, but it's going to change because your generation has even less tolerance for it than mine did. One of the untold stories about Trayvon or Mike Brown or countless young people who can be named. The untold story is the reason we're all talking about them is because teenagers on Twitter refuse to stop talking about them and Facebook. Right. When these things went down, the social media world kept it abuzz for so long that popular media had to pick it up. And so really our children are already leading us in a greater awareness, a greater discomfort, and the need to put an end to this type of discrimination.
So true, because I tell you this much. By trade, I've been in information technology for about 18 years. But I tell you, my daughter is the way she connects with Twitter, the way she's on Facebook. I'm like, oh my goodness, it's a problem for me because I'm just like, what are you, what aren't you being exposed to?
Yeah.
I want to get off a topic for a second and ask you a question. Why are so many people, what gets Black Twitter so enraged when someone says, whether or not they're a public figure, and they say all lives matter?
You know what? I can't answer for all of Black Twitter, but I can tell you all lives do matter and Black lives matter, right? And so, so here's the way I think about it. I think about the fact that if I say I love my mother, that doesn't mean that I don't love other people or that you don't love your mother. Pointing out that Black lives matter doesn't mean that all lives don't matter, but can you say to yourself, Black lives matter, and just stand with that, right? I should be able to say I love my mother without being criticized, and I should be able to say that Black lives matter without being criticized. It's not a contradiction.
So I guess the narrative is to show where Black men are positive. So I'm going to read off a couple things to you, and just to get your response. Because the importance here tonight and for everything with your organization and how we connect with your organization and how you connect with NBC, with your op-ed, and as we move forward, is to end that stereotype and that schism about Black men not being, head of household and everything else like that. So I'm going to say, according to the U.S. Census, the rate of business creation by Black males have been growing at nearly twice the national average for more than a decade. By that measure, Black men are amongst the most enterprising men in America. If you listen to mainstream media, we're just consumers. We just like,
right.
The latest Air Jordans and the newest 4K TV and a Lexus truck, and that's it. We're good.
You're right. Well, and that's the power of media, right? Because, I speak around the country on these matters, and what I love to do when I'm in front of an audience, and if, your listeners at home should do this right now, right? If you've heard those ideas that all we are is consumers and all that kind of stuff, I'll just ask you point blank, do you personally know a Black man who started a business? And the answer is always, well, yeah, I do. If I know Black men at all, I know guys who started businesses. I know 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. I know Black men who served in the military. I know Black men who help other people just because they can. So the interesting thing, what I'm trying to point out is, we all listen to these messages so much from the media that we start to repeat them as if they're fact. But then when we check our own real life experience, you all know Black entrepreneurs and Black former soldiers and Black men who help you. So why are you pretending like they don't exist?
So true. So true. I'm telling you now, Trabian, I'm in the process now of buying into a Black-owned business. Why? Because it's positive, and it's folks that you want to be around and you want to work with, and it's prosperous. And to tell you the truth, sometimes I'm tired of working for someone else.
Of course.
To be truthful.
Of course. One of the characteristics, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, BME is actually based on a lot of research, social science and social psychology research, as well as a bunch of other research on race and messaging. And one of the things that we discovered that I enjoy is Black men as a population are actually signing up in the military at higher rates than all other people. A lot of folks will point out that that's because of economic conditions or something like that. But here's how I would balance that. Black men also tend to give to charities at higher rates than all of the men. They tend to stay engaged with their children at higher rates than all of the men. And by the way, these numbers come from sources like the National Institutes of Health reported that Black men are engaged with their children more than all other men. The Kellogg Foundation did a report on giving that reports that Black households give a higher percentage of their income to charities and all of the households. So these are very reputable sources. But what I'm trying to underline in pointing this out is that Black men actually have a propensity for community building and for serving and protecting. It's something in our personality that often evokes us to take ownership of ours, right? And so what's interesting to me is literally in America, the Black male is the male that is most likely to have served the country in uniform, and is most likely to be engaged with their children. And I mean literally, like when they're in the household, they're changing diapers, they're combing the hair, involved, right? And then they're also the most likely to have given to charity at a higher rate than other men. So when you put together this combination of patriotic, caring, and generous, Black men lead in those categories. So I don't ever feel a need to apologize for Black men. I always feel like, and don't get me wrong, like I recognize there are negative characteristics too, but part of me thinks, everybody has some negative characteristics. I don't introduce you by your negative trait. I like to introduce you by what you're doing that's positive and good. And for some reason, when it comes to black men, we don't even talk about them unless we got something bad to say.
That's true. That's true. You hit it on the head. I want to go back into what you were saying before, because the U.S. National Center for Health Statistics, black men who live with their children are most likely to bathe, dress, diaper, and interact with them daily. Also, black men who do not live with their children are most likely to still maintain contact even after remarrying. These measures, black men are arguably the most engaged fathers in the country. But you wouldn't know, because the narrative out there is, they're the deadbeat daddies.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a problem when this is just spewed out, because if something is repeated 100, 200, 1,000 times, you're going to think it's the truth.
Of course.
You're like,
you literally have no choice. That's the way our minds work. So let me but also point out, I think a lot of the reason why we hang on to those negative narratives is that they're not entirely false. There's real pain in the black community around absence of men being men. And by that, what I mean by that is putting themselves between harm and their families, between suffering or struggle and their children or the women in their lives, right? So that's a real pain. That's a loss that I know a lot of women, a lot of children are feeling. So we're not trying to pretend like that's not real. We just want to stop pretending like black men who get up and do more than their fair share, stay married for 17 years, commit to building businesses and growing communities and informing people. We want to acknowledge them as well. And the interesting thing, of course, is in the real world, sometimes the same man, or I should say both men, are in the same body. Sometimes you have people in the real world who have their aspirations and hopes, and they have their conflicts and struggle in the same life. And we want to speak life to their aspirations and their commitments to others, rather than defining people by their lowest moment or their greatest failure.
Trabian, 20 years ago, in October, it's going to be 20 years ago. So at that time, I was 25. And I don't know, lately, I just had a birthday, and lately I've just been reflecting over, the last 20 or so, or 30 or so years, and I'm like, man, is this, part of getting old, or is this part of just getting wiser? But back in 1995, I attended the Million Man March.
Me too.
And there you go. And it was something because back then, I let my colleagues know that, hey, I'm not going to be in on such and such day. And, immediately they said, oh, you're not going to be in because you're going to D.C.? And I'm like, regardless, I'm not going to be in. But yes, I am going to D.C. Because, that's just the way I am. I'm like, I'm not going to hold my tongue. And I just think back to that, and I'm sitting here thinking, oh, man, in a couple of months, it's going to be 20 years.
Yes,
it's going to be 20 years. And I think back to when the media, this is before Twitter and social media, and even for the most part, Microsoft Windows was even extremely popular because, that was around that time. And even the media back then was discrediting whether or not, there's not 1 million people out here. It's maybe 100,000.
I remember that.
It's just like, oh my goodness, come on.
So, you just reminded me, in the book, Reach, I actually talk about that because, I was at the march. I was at the march, and I went back and looked at, I think it was Harvard or one of the major schools did an official count using satellite imagery and stuff. And they counted 847,000 people. But what I like to remind folks is the march was all day long. So any particular snapshot is only a fraction of the people who actually participated. And if they caught 847,000 in one of those snapshots, it might have been 2 million guys there.
Of course.
So yeah, I definitely remember that. But honestly, I'm not. I mean, maybe I take this from my grandfather, but I'm not really interested in all that has gone wrong in the world because there's always going to be some hole to fill somewhere. But I'm always thinking about how do we build, and what are we going to build on, right? And you can't build on any of these deficits. You can't build on a hole. You can't build on the negative. All you can do is build on your assets. So I always think about black men, our assets, and let's build the future that we're supposed to have with these assets that we already possess.
Hey, I want to real briefly talk about the topic, the social media too that everyone loves. I mean, no, and I'm not talking about a billion and a half people that are on Facebook. I'm talking about Twitter, the 300 or so thousand users, because it's a very powerful tool. It allows me to meet people that are in contact with folks that are like you, and I get great guests all the time, and I'm really appreciative for everything. It's a true blessing. And I will say this. According to Twitter's 2014 Equal Employment Opportunity Report, the company has 49 African American employees in an American workforce of 29, just above 2,900. Ironically, Black users dominate the medium itself. 20% of Black adults use Twitter, compared to 21% of white adults, according to the Pew Research Center. What in the world is going on here?
Well, I mean, to be honest, so I have a background in tech as well. I started a tech company back in 1999. And to be really honest and really blunt, there's a concept called homophily, right? Which is just the idea that we're all attracted to and feel more comfortable around things and people who are like us. And to be really honest, in the tech space, I think there's just a bunch of silos. I think folks don't have diverse networks in a lot of these tech sectors, a lot of these tech companies. I know for a fact that the venture capital that's behind them is very closed. It's not diverse at all. It's a network of white boys. And so I actually think, particularly for these things that blow up like Twitter or Facebook or any of these other mega tech companies, I actually think they don't have a lot of channels, man. They don't have a lot of venues to expand channels, I should say, to expand their workforce. Now, I'm not making an excuse for them, because that's not the fact that it's not easy doesn't mean you don't do it.
Right.
So, but I guess what I'm saying is they are both naturally cut off in terms of how homophily works, and lazy when it comes to overcoming that. And I think it's right to point it out. I think it's right to challenge them. And I also think it's right that we should continue to use the platform to our end, even if our ends are to get Twitter itself to be less lazy. Now, ironically, one of my former employees and a friend works for Twitter. But as fate would have it, he's Indian by birth. He's a great guy, but yeah, he wasn't born black. So what do you do? And just to make it all go full circle, he actually helped me start Be Me. Because we believe, again, Be Me believes that we should value all people. So to have my friend Rishi work with me when I was at Knight Foundation to create Be Me in the first place, that was not an oxymoron. And now that he's at Twitter, the fact that business needs to open its doors to a broader cross-section of the people is something that we don't have to shy away from either. Friends can talk about this stuff openly.
Yes, and I'm hopefully, Trabian, that when this report came out in 2014, that there's some type of diversity office now for Twitter. we hope, yeah. But I want to get into BME. Like I said, I want to be cognizant of your time, but I want to get into BME to say, okay, BME is in 4 of the 5 different cities/states. So if we were someone, so if someone said, hey, Ted, I listened to the podcast with you and Trabian. I want to start up a chapter in Omaha, Nebraska.
Yep.
What are my first steps?
Just go to bemecommunity.org. That's bmecommunity.org and sign up. We have a pledge, a registration pledge on the front page. If you agree with these values, then sign up and just message us. And the values are, number one, we value all members of the human family. Number two, we recognize Black males as assets. Number three, we reject narratives that denigrate people. And number four, we work together to build more caring and prosperous communities. If you're that kind of person, then this is your kind of network. So literally just sign up, and at a minimum, you will start to get our content. You know, these stories not only about about Black men who are building community, but stories about how you can too. Stories about how you can improve your own financial conditions, stories about how you can improve your health, stories about how you can make your community, your family, and really your country stronger, while also making yourself healthier, wealthier, and more knowledgeable. So we're very big on the positive and building on positives. So any of your listeners out there who are interested in learning about BME or becoming part of the BME community, it's bmecommunity.org.
Gotcha. And I just want to clear the air because it's for all races and genders.
Yep.
Got it.
Yeah, and actually, let me explain that a little bit because that might not be clear to people, right?
Okay.
So because why do you have a network that's about Black men, but then you say it's open to everybody, right? But here's why. BME is not about Black men. It's not about saving Black men. It's not about fixing Black men. It's not about the problems of the Black community. What BME is a network of Black men who are committed to building this country, our communities, our cities, our neighborhoods. The men are already committed to being builders. And because they work on issues like youth development and education and public safety and economic opportunity, because they work on issues that we all care about, we invite anyone who cares about those same issues to work with us. We're all about building a more caring and prosperous America. And these Black men are willing to lead, even if other people don't follow. But we're inviting folks that we can work together, just like our values say. Let's work together to build a country that we all want and that we can all believe in. So that's why the doors are wide open. The only real significance or difference with it being inspired by Black men is that we make it a point to point out Black males as assets, and then we live it out. We do it. We don't just talk about it. We do it.
Trabian, there's nothing wrong with, focusing on that and opening the different doors and opening it, opening the community in your organization to, the various genders and races, because the flip side of that is you could be talking about building a wall and throwing Mexicans and their families out of the country and be running for president and being a GOP member and having 26%, this mythical 26% of the voters in favor of you. I mean, you're not talking about that. You're talking about building.
Yes, sir. I'm glad you brought up the dinosaur because Trump, I think, in this case, is another example of an outdated narrative really fighting to the death. The media and other folks have been commenting on how he said these really stigmatizing and blaming things about Mexicans, right? And he's getting all this attention, and people are agreeing with him. And I'm like, well, no. 26% of a fraction of the Republican Party has said that they agree with him. But he can't win an election. They're not even going to vote for him.
No.
What they're saying is he's saying stuff that I wish I could say, and he's saying stuff that, is provocative, and I'm enjoying that we get to blame somebody, right? So they're saying, so he's getting that kind of attention, but he doesn't have a shot in hell of becoming president.
He's entertaining. I got to jump in here and say he's entertaining, and maybe he thinks this is his NBC TV show, or this is just, that forum or that venue or that stage for him to perform. But when it comes down to it, when it comes down to the Electoral College, or when it comes down to seeing who is that qualifying candidate, I highly doubt it's going to be him with his views.
Well, and let's be even more pointed.
Okay.
When it comes down to the American people, they've moved past him. One of the things that, again, doesn't get reported much, but I checked this out at the time that George Zimmerman was, let go free after killing Trayvon Martin. Pew Charitable Trust did a study of people's reactions to it, who was dissatisfied with the verdict. And of course, the people who topped out this list were Black folks, women, and millennials, right? And what was interesting about it to me was the percentage of Black folks, millennials, and women who were dissatisfied with the Zimmerman verdict was almost identical to the percentages that voted for Obama. And so the correlation that I drew was that the American people would elect a Black man president and do believe that what happened to Trayvon was not right. That's the majority of the people. And even though that's not the story that gets told over and over again, I really sincerely believe that the majority of people are not down with open racism. They're not down with the thought that, this young boy's life doesn't matter. I think the majority of people want fairness. They want a country where their children are safe, where they're able to be educated, where the economy is stable. All of us want basically the same stuff. And this color line thing, I think it's a lot weaker now than it was when I was growing up. And I know with all the craziness going on TV, it doesn't feel that way. But when people are asked to vote, when people are asked to put the country on the line, they've already been willing to elect a Black man president twice. They may be ready to elect the first woman to run the country.
Yes.
So and look, they legalized gay marriage. Like, I really think if we're just looking at where people come down on it, a lot of these old stereotypes and these old narratives are already outdated. And people like Trump and some of the folks in the media, they're hanging on to them so hard. They're pushing them so much that they're starting to convince us. They're starting to convince us that it hasn't evolved. That thing you said before about you just hear the same lie over and over and over again, you start to think it's the truth.
Right.
In reality, and I'll stop. I'll pause on this. In reality, the public has already shown that they support the idea of human beings being human beings, but they're too passive about it right now. We're at a tipping point, and we can choose to roll back the narrative to the days when people like Trump could actually become president, or we can choose to accept that in a country that will have no racial majority in the next 10 to 15 years, in a country like that, you have to start valuing all people. And I think that's where the American people are, and we should encourage that transition.
Trabian, I'm going to start to close this out, but I'm going to say this much. It's a different world than my dad and your dad in the 50s and 60s with the drama they had to go through, okay? And with sitting in the back of the bus and not being able to drink at the same water fountain, and being able to earn a living to support your family. It's a different world, okay?
Yep.
The shift itself has happened, but the shift is happening again because when you sit out here and you look across America right.
Yep. Yeah, and let's be clear. Black folks are going to take the brunt of that because we've always taken the brunt of that. We've always been the front edge of the freedom struggle, right? We've always been the folks who are willing to carry an unfair burden, to be honest. But I think because we've always been that way, we kind of built up the muscles for it, and we lead even when other people are quiet. So I'm really excited that people of all races and all genders are willing to divorce these outdated and tired narratives. But I do believe some are more willing than others, right? I do believe there will have to be a front guard, a vanguard, people who are willing to put themselves at risk. That's the way movements have always happened. I think the organizers of Black Lives Matter, and there are many, different hundreds of organizers, but certainly the organizers of Black Lives Matter are those people. They put their reputations at risk. They're going to do what it takes to keep us awake and aware. But I agree with you that it is a different time. I'm just not ready to plant the flag of victory yet. And I also believe, and Be Me actually illustrates this, I believe that Black people are going to have to lead America to this better understanding of itself, to this more genuine narrative about who we are as a nation and what we stand for and what we won't stand for. And I think that's happening. I think it's a positive thing.
Trabian, I'm going to actually have to have you come back because I'm going to want a breakdown of the time that you had a conversation with your son, letting him know, okay, you're a man, and here are the things you have to deal with. And we won't touch upon that now because I want to have you come back and talk about it sometime in the future. But I'm going to close with this. I had Professor Kirk Burkhalter from New York Law School, and he's also a retired detective. And he had that discussion with his son about the do's and don'ts when dealing with law enforcement. Yeah. What to do when you get stopped by the police, and what not to do. And the thing is, his son is 25 and just graduated college. My son is 8. You said your son is 22.
Yep.
And when that no longer becomes a discussion topic, that's when we can say we've made it. We could say organizations like BME have led us to that I guess common ground to take us there. But with that, I'm going to say to you, I want to give you a round of applause, and I don't want you to go anywhere. I want to say anyway in the future, because now that we have a connection, we're going to talk offline and through Twitter and everything else like that. There's any way, if you ever need this as a forum to reach out, because we air in the UK and New Zealand and all over the place to get your message out. You think of using us whenever you need it. I'm going to say to you, I want to hand the mic back over to you and say, give us the best ways to get in contact with not only you, but BME, and any closing thoughts.
Yeah, brother, first of all, I appreciate that generous offer. I meant to say this before. We actually call ourselves BME. We don't use the initials. But I'm really touched by your generosity. Anyone who wants to connect to the BME community, you can do so several ways. I already mentioned go to bmecommunity.org. Also, if you have a hard time remembering that stuff, the Bitly link for us is called My Beliefs Too, right? TOO. So you can get to it that way. If you're in the United States, you can text the word brother to 96,000, and that'll initiate a text conversation that will actually let you register with BME. Again, you can register with BME by texting the word brother to 96,000. And then the comment you made about your coming on for other shows, I would love to. My son was confronted by the police. while he was on campus a couple of years back. So that's a powerful story. Be Me is also, playing a role and involved in the events around the 20th anniversary of the Million Man March. So we'll be doing things related to that. And our book, Reach, we still tour the country. We'll be in Detroit and in New Orleans in the next couple of weeks doing Reach talks with the community about the content of the book and about the issues we're all dealing with today. So thank you again. To all your listeners, please feel free. I am Join Be Me on Twitter, and our organization Twitter handle is Be Me Community. So thank you.
Trabian, thank you so much. Thank you for just taking an hour out of your time, out of your busy schedule, to just put it aside. And I like I said, I'm so gracious. And if there's anything we can do or any work we can do in the future, I want you to keep us on speed dial, keep me on speed dial, because these airwaves are open for you. And I'm sure we'll be doing some work in October
And that was an interview I conducted back in August of 2015 with Trabian Shorters. Some things we got right, some things we got wrong. The candidate that I said wouldn't be president went on to become president. We haven't had a woman president yet, but we've had a woman vice president. Hope you enjoyed it. Ways to listen to the show is latenightparents.com. I'm Ted Hicks.